All right, while the panelists assemble on stage, I just want to do a little bit of an introduction as to what we're going to be talking about today. So, as a lead into this, as the frequency and intensity of 50 and 100-year storms increase, how are cities planning for that resilient and sustainable future? You've probably all heard terms like El Nino, La Nina, atmospheric rivers, bomb cyclones. There's probably a whole bunch of other ones out there that I missed, but since the rainy season started in December of 2022 here in California, there have been 12 significant atmospheric river events. And as those storms pummeled the state, you ended up with soil that became oversaturated and vulnerable to flooding and mudslides. You heard about the mudslide down in San Clemente in the last panel. And if you've been to the Central Valley lately, you know that flooding is a big issue. So this has led to one of the largest snowpacks ever in California. Did you know the snowpack is now 61.1 inches on average? That is 237% of the average. So of course the drought is done. Not really. NOAA expects and believes that the cost from these storms will top $1 billion. So these storms are the first $1 billion weather event of 2023. Congratulations. And while this precipitation has improved flooding, one wet season does not solve the drought that exists in California. These events have pushed the limits of our current infrastructure and tested regulators, agencies, the way we think and the way that we manage stormwater. So we're going to talk about that with this group of folks on the stage right now. We're going to talk about risk assessment, which was mentioned in the last session. I liked what Chris said. He said underground is the most important. As a manufacturer of underground stormwater systems, I appreciate that statement very, very much. And we're going to explore how the interplay between federal, state, county, and city agencies all works together. So today, we have a panel of experts, and we're going to discuss all these topics. In the interests of time, I'm going to introduce all of you, and then we're going to get right into the questions. So, on the stage with me today, I have Adam Hutchinson. He's the Recharge Planning Manager at the Orange County Water District. I have Bert Summers. He's the Contracting Manager for the Western U.S. at Ferrovial Construction, U.S. and Canada. I have Grant Sharp, Manager, South OC Watershed Management Area, City of Orange. And I also have Melissa Yu, Project Management Officer at the City of Long Beach, who has brought a fan group. So with that, I might as well start with Melissa. We're going to ask one question. There's lots of definitions about resiliency. What's your definition of resiliency, Melissa?
Is this on? Okay.
It is.
Resiliency, my answer is really short. It's adaptability and flexibility so that it's strong in challenging times. I think we're still far out there trying to figure it out, and it's a learning lesson as we go along the way.
Awesome. Bert, your definition of resiliency?
I would say the ability for the infrastructure that we install to last for at least the lifetime of the project, preferably with the minimal amount of maintenance and rework.
Awesome. Grant, your definition of resiliency?
My definition of resiliency is the ability to deal with the extremes, and I think we're seeing that, with our climate these days. We're seeing extreme weather conditions, extreme heat, extreme dry weather periods, followed by extreme wet periods and extreme storm events. So the ability of our infrastructure to deal with all these extremes, to me, that's what resiliency is all about.
Awesome. And finally, who did I miss? Adam.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to have a little bit different twist on it. It's kind of like your 401k. You're resilient because you have a diverse portfolio. We always hear about that, right? So as a groundwater provider in Orange County, we look at resiliency as being able to have a diverse portfolio that operates well in different conditions. So whether it's rain or dry, we have systems in place to help us get through it.
Awesome. All great definitions of resiliency. So now we're going to dive into it. And my first question is for you, Adam. In Orange County, you're partnering with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to capture more stormwater behind the Pareto Dam. Can you talk about this project and how you're adapting your existing infrastructure to address the future needs?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So Pareto Dam was built in 1941 to protect Orange County from flood control. It's a major construction project built. And Orange County Water District has been partnering with the Corps of Engineers since the construction of the dam to capture stormwater behind that dam so that we could recharge that water into the groundwater basin. And so we've been doing that for many years. Even as we speak right now, there is 20,000 acre-feet of water behind the dam. That's $20 million worth of water that's parked behind the dam right now. that the Corps is slowly releasing so we can capture that water and put it into the aquifer. So on average, stormwater provides about 20% of our groundwater supply to the basin every year. So a tremendous partnership that we have with the Corps of Engineers to use existing infrastructure for the benefit of everyone. You know, primarily flood control is the primary purpose, but water conservation is the secondary purpose. So it's a great example of multi-purpose infrastructure, kind of the win-win for the Corps and for us and for the environment as well.
That's a really interesting way to think about water, right, from a value perspective. How many millions of dollars of water is behind there? And that's how we're going to have to start to think about water and how we use stormwater. So with that, Bert, with the recent experiences of atmospheric rivers, you're involved in construction projects. What have you learned about that from both your infrastructure projects, how you're completing them, how you're making progress with them? You have to deal with not only the impact of that atmospheric river, but that is part of, as we're starting to build projects, we have to think about managing water and climate events like that. So can you talk a little bit about how you've changed, what you're doing?
Well, so we've had to implement a lot of additional contingencies, I guess you could say. So we have to do a lot of planning and pre-planning and planning around the weather that's out there. It's great when it's dry, but we don't want it too dry because we need to be able to get water for construction, right? But when we have like what we've had the last year and what's going on up in the Central Valley right now, it makes it impossible to actually do things, right? You can't put the infrastructure in because it's so wet. So, you know, for us, we start looking at, you know, it just adds money, right? It just costs more money. The more we have to deal with more water, you know, the more expensive it gets. But we are looking at, you know, designing, you know, we do mostly design build. We are looking at designing, you know, and when we have operations involved, larger pipes further upstream to deal with more water and to potentially slow water down and provide temporary storage so we don't overwhelm the infrastructure downstream.
Thank you. I mean, I know when we think about water and we think about what's happening, you tend to think about the water that's there when the event happens, not how does that potentially impact us solving the problems. And as climate change happens and there's more severe climate events, that's going to cause us challenges with how do we actually solve or put the infrastructure in place to get after that. The other thing is going to be money. And so Grant, the changing needs of stormwater management mean there's likely going to be a need for significant capital investment. We heard that in a couple of the other panels that are up here. How do you convince government and taxpayers? I mean, in your role, that's what you have to do. How do you convince governments and taxpayers to invest in these projects? It's a big challenge. What are some of the things that you do?
Yeah, great question, Brian. That's really the challenge. Most of you in this room probably already know this, but stormwater and management of stormwater runoff is not considered a utility by the California Constitution, and so therefore it is not a service that we can recover fees for. So the cost of managing stormwater runoff in the state of California, it's mostly funded from area to area by general funds. And so that's very true in Orange County, where I focus most of my work. You know, it's local cities and certainly the county. We're pulling money from the general fund in order to fund our stormwater management needs. So, and I could sit up here probably for the next 2 hours and explain to this audience all of the reasons why, from a regulatory standpoint, we need to invest in stormwater capital improvement projects. But I know none of you want to hear all that. And I also know that in general, the public, that's not going to appeal to their sense of you know, wanting to contribute and fund projects. So the trick is, how can we look at other benefits that can be that you know can come along with those stormwater management capital improvement projects, benefits that will help address climate change, that will help address water supply resilience, that can improve the environment, improve flood conditions, and so on and so forth. And so it's really looking for those types of multi-benefit types of projects. That's how we're going to get our stormwater infrastructure needs met.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people that get really excited about digging a big hole, putting a pipe into it. I mean, I do, but there's not a lot of other people. You do. There's a few of us in the room that care about that, but most taxpayers, if you can't see the benefit from it, like the comment that was made earlier, underground is the most important, but it's sort of like your roof on a house. You'd rather spend your money on your kitchen than the roof. And so quality of life and placemaking, which we heard about in the last session. So Melissa, when you're planning green infrastructure or stormwater management systems or systems that combine those two things together, quality of life or what happens to that project needs to be considered. So within your community, what are some of the things that you're looking at doing to ensure that the community is involved and there's actually a benefit to the community when you're actually solving that stormwater solution?
So right now, since Long Beach is actually in the county of LA, we do have funding called Measure W. I'm sure some of you have seen it. Sorry, Grant. I know. Orange County. I used to be with them in Orange County.
We're very jealous.
So we have Measure W regional and local funding, and currently the city of Long Beach has a few regional projects that have come a long way. One of them being LB Must. We have another one underway, Skylinks, the stormwater capture system. But what we do is when we have these projects in the planning and design phase, we bring the community involved. We have schematics because they get to see the schematics. It's not underground like the stormwater systems are. So when they see these schematics, we present it to them in community meetings. We'd had several ones for our LB Must project that we had, and we get their feedback. Whether it's a disadvantaged community, whatever they want to see. One of them wanted to see a bar in one of our projects. But, like little things like that, get their feedback, what they want to see, because, this is also something they have to look at. And, aesthetics is a big deal. But at the same time, we're telling them the reason why we're doing this project is to treat stormwater, capture, and reuse it, and tell them it's kind of a lessons learned. It's a public outreach at the same time. Hey, by the way, these are the stormwater challenges. This is what we're doing, and what would you like to see? And by getting them engaged, we come back time and time again and let them know where we are along with the project. That way we know that the community is involved and that they understand where their money is going to, especially with Measure W, because with Measure W, it comes out of the property tax.
Okay, a little bit of a follow-up question to that. I mean, what have you learned through that process? I mean, what are you doing differently now than what you used to do in the past?
Well, I think for the stormwater division, management division, I've been in Long Beach almost 6 years. I don't think we reached out to the public very much. And I also think public outreach was not very strong. I do think we're still learning and aiding that. Believe it or not, we may all know the stormwater challenges and everything, but a lot of the community still do not. So I think it's a very big deal to get them involved in the very beginning, because when they start to see it and they don't know anything about it, then they start to call our council districts, what's going on here, what's going on there, and they want to know where their money's going to. So I think the biggest key thing is any project that you start, whether it's transportation, stormwater, whatever, you have to involve the public, because if not, they start to wonder what you're doing out there when they see shovels going.
Right on. What's all that money going towards? So with that, I'm going to go back to Adam and talk about, you mentioned the amount of water and the land behind the Pareto Dam. How are you using new technology to forecast and inform the reservoir operations? So taking that existing infrastructure that we have and maximizing the usage of that. Clearly, things are changing, models are changing. What are you guys doing? What sort of technology are you using to make sure that infrastructure lasts much longer than it was planned to last?
Thank you for that question. So before I start, I want a survey question. How many of you in the audience have heard of the term forecast-informed reservoir operations? Anybody? Raise your hand. Not very many. Great. I'm so glad to be here. So, so as you know, this year was a record wet year in a lot of areas of the state. We just came out of record drought. Well, there's a lot of work going on, particularly at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, on really understanding atmospheric rivers and how we can use better modeling, better technology to really forecast when those storms are going to come, how hard they're going to be, how intense, where they're going to land. And so that's being leveraged by the reservoir operators like Prado Dam, where I'm working, up Lake Mendocino on the Russian River, the Yuba Feather Rivers, all these dams around the western U.S. are now being looked at and saying, how can we use forecast information to operate these reservoirs better? That means storing more water when we know it's going to be dry in the future, or letting water go when we see a big rain event coming so we can increase flood control capacity, as well as capture that water back at the back end of the storm. So really trying to be more proactive and looking ahead and operating our reservoirs in a more smarter way. That doesn't take away the need for more storage. We still need more dams, we still need to do that, but at least let's take what we have already on the books and try and operate it in a more smart, intelligent manner to really benefit flood control, water supply, and the environment. It's truly a win-win all the way around when you look at it. Let's do that. Let's get the most out of what we currently have, and then see what more do we need to do to modify existing infrastructure or build new infrastructure to capture stormwater, because we know those wet years are going to be wetter and drier years are going to be drier.
Thank you very much. Bert, you put your hand up, so you're aware of the technology they're using on the management of our reservoirs. Talk a little bit about how you're using technology and what you're doing around performance-based specifications, looking at changes to backfill and loads, and how you're actually building projects, knowing that what you have to build a project for, the extreme weather conditions it has to last. What type of technology, what sort of changes are you making to building practices and construction practices?
Well, so that's a very complicated question, because one of the biggest issues we have is that we want to be able to use the best material for the project, right? And since we actually operate a lot of these projects that we build for 30 or 35 years, we're very concerned with the maintenance costs and what it takes to clean out a pipe once it's in the ground. How often do we have to do inspections X, Y, and Z? So we are looking at total life cycle costs. And what we run into a lot of times is we get into very prescriptive specifications from owners that say, only use this kind of pipe. And that might not be the best pipe for the project. So that's one thing that would like the owners to do, is to say, hey, don't just tell us to use a certain type of pipe. Let us use what's best for the project and best for the overall life cycle of the project. So that's the first tip to all the owners in the room. But really, I mean, we're looking at yes, ADS pipe is there's a lot of advantages to it. I think I installed 100-something thousand feet of that stuff back on my first big pipe job in the 90s. But I put in thousands and thousands of miles of pipe of all different kinds, and you really have to look for the application that's there and make sure that you have the right pipe for the right application. And we look at what we can install where. Like ADS is great when you're not trying to install pipe underwater. If you're trying to install pipe under the groundwater, it's a little bit of a pain because it tends to float, right? So, we really, that's kind of what we look at. There's prescriptive backfill requirements and things like that. And sometimes those can affect what type of pipe we select. And those are the kinds of things that we want owners to start taking a look at is what's really best for the project. We know there's a long life cycle after it, but you have to look at what's best, at construction for CapEx and then O&M.
Total installed cost is definitely the way of the future, looking at, to your point, not just the initial project cost, but what does that mean from a maintenance perspective, especially as the environment and the climate changes with the amount of water that's coming down. So we obviously, we're big fans of open specification, so throw that out.
Yeah, we look at like how many joints are in a run, and our O&M guys are counting those. Because they know every one of those joints is a potential failure point. And we look at the soil conditions around them. Is it clay? Are we in rock? Or what are we in? So we're considering all of that during the design.
Absolutely. And if you design a good system in the beginning, it's absolutely going to be resilient and last much longer. And so with that, I'm going to go to Grant and talk a little bit about one of the things Bert mentioned was the maintenance, and reducing pollution load in stormwater runoff is extremely important. So solving a problem upstream, and then you solve your issue and then you push the problem downstream. What are the innovative ways that you're looking at reducing pollution load and making sure that what we do release back into the water cycle or into our oceans, lakes, rivers, and streams is good quality water with reduced pollution load?
Well, the way we're approaching it is looking at opportunities to partner. And fortunately, in Orange County, where I work at Orange County Public Works, we have tremendous partnerships with organizations like Adams, Orange County Water District, Orange County Sanitation District, and I work a lot with our water and wastewater agency partners in South Orange County. What that does, Brian, is that opens the door for potential opportunities. And when you think about the reuse, the capture and reuse of stormwater, that's great from a water supply standpoint. I think Adam can really expand on the benefits. His agency can see when we put that stormwater into the ground and it replenishes our groundwater resources. That's a tremendous thing. But from my standpoint, and what my mission is, the other great benefit from that is that when we capture that stormwater runoff and we use it, put it to use, that also has an environmental benefit of reducing pollutant loads. And on top of that, it also, as I think Adam alluded to, it can help alleviate flooding issues downstream. So when we utilize nature-based solutions, when we're capturing that stormwater and putting it into our groundwater resources, it has the added benefit of not just reducing pollutant loading downstream, but it is also helping to restore more of a natural hydrologic regime for those tributary areas and returning the entire drainage system to more of a natural state before the development came in and changed that all of those runoff conditions. So I think from our standpoint, we're looking at ways to partner with certainly our water and wastewater agencies, ways to use that stormwater runoff, put it to water supply use, but there's a lot of other benefits, as I said, to reusing stormwater, and one of the great things is it helps us meet our regulatory requirements to reduce pollutants downstream. So it's protecting those who are swimming and using the beaches and for our coastal communities, less runoff making it to those locations where people recreate and swim in the water. That's a win-win for everyone. So those are just some of the ways we're thinking about it.
Definitely using that stormwater as opposed to just letting it back into the environment. So to you, Melissa, I'm going to ask you a question around sort of building on what Grant said. Most systems today are pretty passive, right? You sort of collect water, you store it, and then it goes slowly back into the environment. How's the city of Long Beach looking at active water management, or are you guys looking at active water management or reuse of that stormwater into other types of applications?
Well, I don't know if you guys have heard, we have actually a regional project that we're working on. It's called the Long Beach Municipal Urban Stormwater Treatment, LB MUST. It's one of our biggest regional projects we're doing right now, and I think what we're doing is we're collecting the water from the LA River, bringing it in, and we're treating it at 2 million gallons per day, with the option of expanding the system to 4 million gallons later on. And in addition to that, we treat the water, we return it back to the LA River, also with the option of a wetlands that we have next to it to sustain that wetland. And potentially, this is the first phase. What we're doing right now too is seeking grants, which we've gotten a few already, for phase 2, where we're going to build up the LA River from our pump stations, pull the water in, treat it, and do the same thing with other agencies upstream from us asking, so when are you getting to us? But and I think the biggest thing is when I came here 6 years ago, it was still kind of in the process of being vetted and trying to get it out to bid and whatnot. It was a matter of getting everyone's support for that big project, knowing that, hey, once we get this foundation done, phase 1, we can move it up. So we're currently in construction right now. We're doing that. The building's up. The water, the rain that they said we weren't going to get, that we got this year, has impacted our wetlands construction right now. But that's what we intend to do. And those are one of the projects that we're doing. In addition to other regional projects, we're trying to think outside the box. Also to working with other departments within public works or whatnot, like our transportation, like the previous, when they talked about green infrastructure, one of the things we're doing with our traffic bureau is they're wanting to do a guidance document, a complete streets guidance document, and they want to incorporate Green Street concepts, what we should be thinking outside the box. So I feel like we weren't there 5 years ago, because if I don't have to do it, we don't need to do it. We don't have money. That's still the case, but now it's more like, hey, we need to be more resilient. We need to think outside the box, make sure we're working out everyone's concerns, whether it's traffic, streets, including on my my public services bureau. These are my guys over here in Long Beach. They're the ones that help maintain my storm drains, everything, and I have to work with them. And we have to all work on the same team and just, make sure that we can all see eye to eye. We all have end game challenges and everything, but we know what we need to do and just work together on it to meet the end game.
Awesome. So time is winding down here, but what you've heard, I think there's some themes here that stormwater is a resource. We should treat it as a resource. We should put value against it. So in the last 2 minutes and 30 seconds that we have, each of you, very quickly, starting on this side, you've got 20 seconds to leave the audience with an unbelievably insightful statement. Go, Grant.
Well, I think you already made that unbelievably insightful statement, Brian. Stormwater is a resource, and we should approach it. And no matter what the project is, every single project has to deal with stormwater, whether it's transportation or vertical projects. That everyone has to deal with stormwater. Let's take advantage of those opportunities to capture that stormwater and use it as a resource.
Thank you.
So 2 things. One, let your project needs determine what the infrastructure you install is. Don't let a Green Book spec or an Orange Book spec or a Caltrans spec be your only consideration. And 2, for those of you that are owners in the room, we evaluate owners the way you evaluate contractors. So if you are kind to your contractors and process change orders in a timely manner and treat them with respect, they will treat you with respect, and they will bid your projects, and you will get better prices than the owners that are not nice to their contractors.
Partnership, good.
If you're nice, you get a price break, huh? That's good. Absolutely. All right, awesome. I think my last comment for you is just what I've realized about FIRO is it's really what I call a silo buster. It's really allowed all the government entities to kind of have their little silos to really come together and say, we need to look at stormwater as a resource. And so I've just encouraged all of you to really look at stormwater as a way to really connect all of us together, and let's make things happen, because we know the future is changing. The future is here now, so we need to adapt and really learn to do this, approach stormwater differently.
I think you guys said it all, but basically, in the end of the game, like Adam has says, I think there has been silos when it comes to stormwater, but I think we need to all work together, included in our design and plans, and more importantly, learn from lessons learned. I think stormwater is still up and coming. It has been for a long time, but we have to learn from when we put these big projects in, we need to learn from them, look at the operation and maintenance and learn, because then you're gonna be able to use that in future projects, lessons learned, and it'll educate everybody moving forward.
All right, and with that, I'd like to have you all help me thank our panelists.